And we're live to talk about extroverted feeling in ENFP. And ENFP resembles people who resemble that hypothetical type. So then, we've got Carol Linden here from the website. Is it Carol Effective with People?
Yes, that's mine. Thank you.
Right, okay. And we have Farah here, who is, interestingly enough, a sensory introvert, and therefore is a cause of quite a little bit of cognitive dissonance for me as a in that, but it's a fun bit of cognitive dissonance in that she has artisan traits, and she's like, admire some ESFP traits, but in socionics, she's like, I think I could be SEI or SY. And it's like, that doesn't really help me in terms of like TI. But it helps you get some distance on the systems and think, okay. And it stops people from believing in any one system as this is the truth. It like gets you some distance and makes you look at okay, what are the assumptions, what assumptions have people made that have led them to this condition where they can type people in such a way? What error in the system?
Ben, you know that Linda Behrens teaches the reason she uses 3 models at a time, temperament, interaction styles, and type, is because she says no model is perfect. So using multiple models to go at it from different angles helps us get at more truth, because no system, none is perfect.
Oh,
and that's
totally
why I like using. That's why I like using multiple models too. It tells us so much more.
Yeah, and I think one that can be added easily from Socionics to Linda Berenson that she could adapt is, although it might be a little bit pejorative, and that is the romance styles, because Socionics does see like the SE types as a little bit forthright romantically, and it might not be politically correct to like explain it.
Especially so not in puritanical America, Ben.
Yeah.
Farrah's laughing at me.
Yes.
Well, the Bible Belt, right? You know.
Right. I'm in North Carolina. Farrah knew exactly what I meant.
Exactly.
I mean, but it does come out. I mean, it's a good. I mean, somebody mentioned this. Like, even so it can go a little bit with the interaction styles. We're a little bit off track, folks, but we'll get on track. So, for example, ENFJ is a good example where they are a dominant type in terms of their interaction style, but theoretically, in terms of their romance style, I would say that they are dominant until they meet someone who they believe is worthy of leading them, I would say.
That's interesting that you say that they essentially they are led, not they lead. Because
no, if the person is, because somebody else, Eve said this, INFJ resemble that it's if they think the person has the stuff.
Oh, they are led if they feel the person is worthy of leading them. I certainly have experienced that when I've been in that mode. Yeah, it's this willingness to play both roles.
Yeah.
Right, and ENFJ is an in-charge style in interaction styles, and directing style and disc. So yeah, ENFJ has that directing style to begin with.
It's just that because they have this, because they've got that tertiary SE, and it's like they've got that little bit of a. So it's like they could be like open.
That person is super attracted to them, but that person is also rare. I have seen ENFJs be led, but it's only by one person. That person really has to show themselves to be capable.
Yeah,
and not just capable, but have that level of trust with that ENFJ. But that combination can be extremely potent.
You can get that with, say, big Hollywood actresses, and it's like in their private lives they're being dominated by a male partner, and it's like that doesn't seem to make sense.
It's interesting because I know more male ENFJs than I do females, actually. So I'm thinking of a male ENFJ when I think about this. That I guess in the case of male and female, that fits in more with obviously societal norms and all of that.
Yeah, that can get tricky as well as the ENFJ. And then we've got to try and separate out all this stuff, and it becomes tricky. And you have to
this, Carol, if I can say to Rachel, I would have said until the past 2 years, I would have said I knew way more female ENFJs, but I've had more and more helping job seekers stuff now in the past 8 years. I know more and more ENFJ males, and every one of them has had a high-level leadership position in the industry they came from. So I
They're
now
cool.
can say
They're
I
cool.
know a bunch of
Speaking
ENFJ
of them.
men.
Yeah.
So thanks for saying that.
I mean, yay! Sorry, I'm not massively warm this evening because I have the same as you. I have sinusitis, so.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Anyway, back on track. I apologize, Ben.
Right, okay. So we're going to be talking about FE, Ian, the ENFP, and so that I don't get distracted and so that people don't think that, because there might be some people watching this who are coming straight from MBTI and are thinking, what the heck are you talking about? The second function in ENFP is our lovely FI. So what I'm going to do to show you folks is I'm going to show you the Kersey profile, and he wasn't using functions, and I'm going to show you some bits of text that I believe sound a lot like FE. What I've got to do first is go to the correct graphic, but we'll get back to this later. It's not popping up. I need the thing to pop up so that I can go to another picture. Oh, I can just go this way. Oh, that's just an advert. But take note of it. US I'm going this way. Oh, that's how any people think. Look at this. I think like this. That's MPs. Do you relate to that, Carolyn?
Actually,
Rachel?
Ben, that's fascinating you say that. I have extroverted thinking in the tertiary. I'm very clear about that, and it could have to do with all the extroverted thinkers who brought me up, that I got no choice but to get trained in that. This is very embarrassing to admit publicly, but I actually think in bulleted list. And I know that's embarrassing because yours things looks very creative and wonderful, but my mind actually goes to the extroverted thinking and does that in bulleted lists. So, but Rachel, do you do like this, the mind map?
I was about to say that actually this diagram, sorry, my mum just came in. This diagram looks slightly not expansive enough. I feel like each branch would have several categories leading off it before it would summarize my thinking. See, each of this only has one thing. Like each thought leads to an individual thought, and that's just like, not enough.
Yeah, this is quite a bit like me, but like I have technically, in the type that I resemble, have the rider horse at the TI scene. Keep it consistent, Ben.
Yes, the bit that's like me is the totally unrelated concept with the sub-concepts, and then the sub-concepts coming off that.
And then this bit at the bottom. So I usually end up over-explaining or being totally inarticulate.
Yes. See, when I'm thinking with the most greatest clarity, it's impossible to explain the simultaneous ideas that are so beautiful and so complex and so functioning because words.
That makes total sense, Rachel. That makes total sense.
Now, somebody commented on my NE when I put the there. This reads like someone's amphetamine psychosis fever dream. There's just enough legit information here to make it worth considering.
It's like Robin Williams. He was NE on steroids. I get it, Ben.
Yeah.
And this is why I don't try amphetamines.
Good. Neither one of us should, Rachel. We don't need it. We have extroverted intuition. We don't need amphetamines.
Oh no, we do not. Right, then we got here. Right, so this is the Kersey profile. We're not going to. I'd like to do a separate hangout on this, so we're just going to concentrate on the pink, the green and the pink in FE. So it's like I just think this like the second scan has more FE stuff. So we've got there like.
This is type related. So because I'm aware that this is a somewhat professional context, I'm having to really not make random comments, and this is a challenge for me.
That's creative FE. You're going against your authenticity. Right. So you're being benevolent. Right. So this is about the cause. So here we go. In Socionics, FE is more about emotional expressivity and reading other people's emotions and being able to change other people's emotions. So we've got here intense, wide-ranging variety of emotions, great passion, The next page is a bit more. This is where I'll let Carol have a look at that, especially the stuff in pink. And I'll ask you if you think that is FE.
Oh yeah. This was my first introduction to this whole world. 28 years ago was Kiersey's Please Understand Me Too. I just devoured it and highlighted the whole thing too, Ben. I get Kiersey. It was later when I studied under Beebe that he started helping me tease out FI and NE. And he says you do see a lot of FE in ENFPs. He said it's just not carefully modulated the way it is in people who have it as a dominant or auxiliary. But even Beebe would see that a lot of the expressiveness in ENFPs is our FE coming out, but not being as careful as FE is for others. So I believe we've got a lot of FE. Beebe kind of... Go ahead. Sorry, Rachel.
No, you weren't finished. I'll go after you. Go ahead. I'm interested.
Okay. So, yeah, would you make that bigger again, Ben? I could read it when you had it bigger. Thank you. So, yeah, I'm willing to believe about reading other people. And, I mean, that sounds terrible. You don't want to tell this to people in public. This is offensive. But it's not that we try to be invasive, but it's the empathy thing. And Dario explains, and I forget the region of the brain, but it's right here on the left side, this region that has more mirror neuron activities in it. And Dario says ENFPs test he's done this for 8 years now. ENFPs test with higher mirror neuron activity than anyone else. And it's mirror neurons that you use to feel into another person's situation and feel what's real for them. And we do that without intending to. In fact, I can't find the off switch. Ben, if you know where the off switch is, if you would please tell me, I would appreciate it, because it's exhausting.
If somebody emotionally shuts down to me, that and I am left alone with nothing to do, no, I still don't shut down. No, the off switch doesn't really exist. Yeah, I was about to say I had shut down. No, it does actually. It does. If they shut down on me, then I'm able to shut down on them. If they shut down on me first,
right?
But that's the only instance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, go ahead, Ben. Yes, this makes a lot of sense to me. Go ahead. What you were going to say about FE and ENFP, Ben?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a thing that Dario noticed with this area. Attend to social feedback behind the left ear, which is strong even in the STJs, which don't theoretically have strong FE. So it's like, here's a temperament thing coming in.
That's right. That's right. The stabilizer temperament or guardian temperament, it's all about social appropriateness. Yep.
And so that area we're talking about, do you think that's like region F7? Because did you seem to point in front of you?
Yes. Unfortunately, Google's got a big black thing with icons in it in front of this picture that I don't know how to make go away, but I can kind of translucently see through it. Yes, I do believe it's F7, which is where the mirror neuron activity takes place, but I can't read everything there because of Google.
Mirror others' behavior, mentally rehearse. Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Does everybody have that going on? That right at the top of this big screen area, there's the word Google and a bar of icons. Everybody else got that? Well, I wonder how to move that. I do not know. Hold on, let me see if I make the screen bigger. If I can. Oh, went away. Thank you. I made the screen big and it went away. Thank you so much, Farah, for that suggestion.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Well, you said no, and then I thought I just tried something. See, my NE just went into action and said, "Let's just try some shit here." I did, and it worked.
Right, now here's a bit. Now I'll be on it. Now here's an example. Now some people may not know. So you got there. What kind of smile is that, folks?
Well, his eyes aren't crinkling, so I'm not sure that's a genuine smile.
That was a little bit technical there. That was like a technical approach that you used there,
well,
Carol.
I've been taught that if it doesn't crinkle out here, your eyes aren't smiling and just your mouth is smiling. That a genuine smile, your whole face smiles and your eyes crinkle.
Yeah,
What that smile says is,
where your
I'm
eyes-
sad, I want to connect with you, but so I'm gonna kind of try and seem happy, but I don't really want you to think I'm happy. But maybe I do. But I'm mostly just trying to show a level of appropriateness. That's what that smile says to me.
Could be. I could
It
hear
doesn't
that.
show an unwillingness to engage, but it doesn't. It shows a kind of longing for some kind of closeness, like some. I have a whole narrative though, which obviously isn't what.
Well, one of the problems with these books, I got this from a book, and when it's showing the genuine emotions,
Yeah.
you better have people who are actually showing it, because one time I did a test, and the problem is they had bad actors and actresses trying to show the genuine emotions, and it sort of screwed it up, because it was like you've got a bad actor and actress doing a non-genuine emotion, and then a bad actor and actress doing a genuine emotion, and it didn't work as well. But when you actually get proper pictures of it from real people actually experiencing the proper emotion, then you can see it better. Because I remember what happened. There was an online test where it didn't have the genuine emotions. It had people acting the genuine emotions.
Yeah. I don't know if you know Paul Teager and Rob Toomey. Paul's famous for writing those series of books on career, marriage and children and career counseling. But Rob Toomey's got a very successful type company, and Rob did a series of videos for companies, and he told me, he said, Carol, we started out with professional actors and actresses trying to portray the different 16 types. He said, we could not make it happen because the real human actors type bled through every time. So we had to give up on professionals and use genuine human beings, off the street human beings who worked for that company, who validate a certain type. He said that's the only way we could get the real thing to show through, was use the real person with that type.
Also, I think it's happened even a little bit. Claire Foy is very good as the Queen in The Crown, but in real life, she is ESFP, like very, again, creative use of FE, very expressive in ESFP. And sometimes there's little moments where it's appropriate to the script, but she when she's playing the Queen, she's like very expressive, and it's like, well, how much of that is the actress deciding to do that to get a little bit of a bit of humor? Like, for instance, the Queen's just had her hair done, and it's like a reaction shot to seeing her face in the mirror to add a little bit of humor. Because what you'll get from if you watch The Crown is the Queen is pretty much ISFJ, and Prince Philip is like 100% ESTP.
Oh, I thought she was
Ben, I think she's hard. I'm sorry. I can't believe I'm arguing with a real Englishman over this. Ben, she looks classic ISTJ to me. I watched about 4 hours of her on the Smithsonian Channel the other night. Oh my God, she looks classic ISTJ. Very non-emotive. T to me.
Maybe it's different context.
Yeah.
Maybe it's different context, and that actually has to do with that has to do with FE. Mind blown. An additional possibility.
Right, so here we go. This pink stuff at the bottom, if I'd like both Rachel's and Linda's, not Linda's, Carol's thoughts on.
It keeps going away. Put it back up there, please, Ben.
Oh, if you click on the square, then it will stay on it.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Ben. I forget that.
Are we starting from despite the occasional misinterpretations?
Yeah.
I can't make... Oh, when somebody talks, it goes away. Okay. This all looks real to me.
I can't even focus.
I can't make it go back up.
Well, if you click on my square, it should stay on my square. Or
okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think we should just read it out loud, and that won't be the difficulty.
Okay.
And that makes very good sense to me, Ben. I'm willing to listen to anything you have to say about it.
Well, I just think that this is an example of Kurzius looking at a type as a whole type. And the MBTI people, I'm not going to say the B people, because the B himself was using an 8-function model, but And see, the thing is, what a lot of people don't realise is that MBTI professionals actually use an 8-function model. It's just that the people talking about MBTI on YouTube and in the groups, they still use the 4-function model.
Yeah, right. And they still think there's that the mental functions are feeling and thinking and sensing and intuiting, and they act like there's no such thing as the 8th function. But that's just a very old-fashioned way of doing it. And Linda Behrens would tell you, you can't even, it's what they did in the beginning, unfortunately, is a little unskillful, was you add all these 4 letters up and then you get this thing. And she said, no, it's way more holistic than that. It's like a gestalt. There's this thing you can't get just by adding up 4 letters, and that each type has its own being and its own entity. Oh, and now I'm getting too philosophical, but she would agree with you, Ben, that each you can't just add up the letters and get it. Go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, I just said I'm interested in the philosophy.
Oh,
I think
okay.
philosophy is valuable.
Okay. So Ben, I appreciated Linda doing that, talking about you can't just add it all up, and she's very careful in her teaching about not making people feel put in a box, because I can't tell you how many people I've run into who've been wounded and angered by having Myers-Briggs and psychological type taught them in a very unskillful way that made them feel labeled and put in a box, which is the opposite of what it was for.
I mean, even in the Kersey ISFJ profile, he starts off by talking about the role of protector, but then he talks about ISFJs make good general practitioners, and he talks about the other kinds of careers that they're good at. And
I love Kersey. I do. I am not as comfortable making as declarative statements as Kersey is about this type is good doing this thing, because people are too. You can't take a type in a statistical thing and apply it to an individual human being. So I actually own his DVDs, but I've never shown them to people because I'm not comfortable with how definitive he is when he talks about a temperament. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Your tea is so strong.
I'm so sorry, Rachel.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. I'm gonna. That's my biggest compliment of the day. Thank you, Rachel.
it's like because
I was just thinking, like, you're like such an example of someone who like has the same preferences as me, but like has such a kind of like balanced expression. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like development of them.
Well,
it's really cool to see.
Ben, this is a type lesson. If I'll just take a minute to explain. Yeah. I am the ENFP daughter of a very, very young ISTJ mother. She was only 19 when I was born. So basically, I was raised by a very young ISTJ. So extroverted thinking is the only language she spoke. So as a small toddler, I had to learn to speak her language. And then my father and my stepfather, they were computer software engineers, and that's what they spoke too. So I was this little kid surrounded by all these extroverted thinkers, and it was hard, but I get it as an adult that they developed extroverted thinking in this ENFP before I had a chance to opt out of it. They developed it in me, because Farrah's nodding. Yeah. I mean, can't you see, Farrah, as a child, to survive, I had to learn how to talk to them?
Yeah, I was telling Ben, when you're a child, you have more neuroplasticity in your brain. So I think if you got TE like that young, it probably did take hold and grow and develop,
What was someone like Rachel, I mean, she wants to talk about it, like her parents, just a little bit more TI, like TI on steroids from her parents.
Yeah, my parents, they are INFJ and ENTP mathematicians.
Oh,
hi,
wow.
Mom. Love you.
Wow.
They're actually. Say hey.
One moment, I need to click on the square.
And yeah, so that was, I don't know, there was a lot of. Sorry, Mom. Okay, that was inappropriate.
Tell her it's okay. We didn't really see her. It's okay.
Yes.
that's not what she's worried about. She didn't want to be interrupted reading.
Oh.
This is also the kind of INFJ where they have this thing, and I absolutely agree with Maria about this, where you have the beneficiary shift. And beneficiary shift for ENFP is to act a bit like ENTJ, and for INFJ it's to act like INTP. And so young INFJs can get quite academic. And I'm starting to wonder, now I know Dario and Victor think that Carl Jung resembled an INTP, but I'm sort of thinking, well, what was if he was an INFJ who thought he was an INTP?
Okay, that's that. Ben, thank you for explaining that. What is that called? Beneficiary shift? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, it's called a beneficiary shift. There's a certain kind of intertype relation in SOCIONICS that I'll explain. I can explain another time. It's a particular thing.
That's fine. That's fascinating.
We can do a separate video on that.
That's all right. I learned something just right now from it that was helpful, because it really does help me. It helped me in my career. It helps me all the time to shift into extroverted thinking.
What it is,
so thank you.
You're welcome. It's a bit like the loop from the dominant to the tertiary function, but it starts the other way around. It starts with the tertiary and then goes to the dominant. So that's why you get TENE, and in Model G, ENTJ is TENE, because it's like they have that strong business logic, and they've got like that unconscious ability to generate a ton of ideas for like making money.
Oh God, I wish I'd gotten that. Ben, I'm serious about what you said about INFJs. Really resonates with me. I worked at a software company, so I worked around a lot of heady people anyway. But I can't tell you how many INFJs I knew in that company, and they all have a very heady intellect. And maybe it's because they were at work, and that was the appropriate thing to do there. But they could all go very analytical on you in a heartbeat and come off as a TI. Within instead of Farah, are you nodding that you've witnessed that too with INFJs?
Actually, I have a guy that sits behind me in the next cube, and I get to hear him talk, and I get to hear him interact with people all the time. And he's very FE, very good at, really manipulating the environment, doing what's appropriate, and really engaging with people. And then at the same time, he's like, he's into Bitcoins, and he does all these like,
he loses TI points there.
Well, he is very he's very analytical, more so than you would think. He used to be a nurse, and he came to be a systems analyst, and just I suspect he's career
transition.
Yeah.
Ben, you're grinning. Ben, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like, being into Bitcoin and actually believing in it, you're losing TI points there, because
but
like,
you're TI.
Yeah, I'm not into Bitcoin. It's a huge bubble. It's all of the reasons that people said that Bitcoin would work. Even now, they're saying it won't work as a currency because it's just too complex to actually use it as a transaction. So it's not a store of value. It won't work. Bitcoin would only work if. Well, okay, what can work is if you have a digital currency that's actually backed by gold, because then it's a store of value. I'm huge on the gold standard, and so I'll again. That's a separate hangout.
Okay. 20th century that has a constant value. That isn't gold, because gold is like, as a metal, it's like, I don't know, like there must be something that we can't stop valuing that isn't gold.
Gold is the best because it doesn't deteriorate. Gold is the best.
What about the metal that, like, the solenoid, the stuff that we use in like computer technology? Like, surely that's going to like maintain its value.
Okay, guys, we're way off here now, and I apologize.
I don't have an argument with Rachel about gold. I'm a huge gold person.
Okay, go ahead.
Right then, what we're going to do is we're going to go on to, we've done that, we'll go on to the next, because we'll have a separate hangout going through the Kersey profile. There's a bit here where I've got NE in blue, and that's a bit more, and FE in red.
You mean pink?
Absolutely right there, Carl, yes.
Okay. I think that's Rachel Jordan. I think that was Rachel chortling at us.
You see, I was moving this stuff at the same time. I can only do one thing well at a time. If it is well. I'm not. I might switch Rachel's mic off, but not. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, if there's too much background noise, then you can switch it on and off at our own whim. I'm not censoring that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will turn off my phone.
This all makes sense to me.
Right. Okay. Okay. So now what we're going to do, folks, is go to.
Wait, Ben, can I say something before you leave?
Yep.
However, having just said what I had before about not being comfortable with Kiersey's definitive statements, he says things. Whoops! I got to get it back up there again. It popped down. Doggone it! This is very annoying when I can't get to stay up there. So there we go. They make excellent teachers, ministers in general, attractive to the communicative arts, making talented journalists, writers, novelists, cornerists, blah blah blah. Can't read it now. But all those things, I'm not saying each ENFP would be good at all those, but I've seen examples, and I can believe that and I've seen data actually on journalists and teachers. ENFP show up very high in journalists and teachers, and even in college professors.
Yeah, especially journalists.
Yeah, they really do. And you can imagine that NE really serves them well in going after things and investigating.
Yeah, the search for novelty and curiosity.
Yeah.
And also, if I want to be a bit cheeky about this, liberal bias amongst journalists.
Yeah, if you wanted to be cheeky.
Right then. So, what have we got? So we've got the Model G overview. Now, would you prefer this old school hand-drawn one? This is my first attempt at it. Or would you like the brand spanking, well, I was helped by an INTJ.
Okay, I have to say that's more readable, but the other one is very charming, Ben.
Oh, I thought you were about to say Scarlet. Right, so theoretically we have right, and this is a good thing too. Oh, and this is something that is now Victor was influenced by Kersey that we know of, where he's actually written that he got the idea of like using the role variants. You know, like where Kersey has like the names like the inspector and things like that. Well, Victor actually used it for a different type because like Victor is like super TI, philosophical background, and he's like ISTJ must have dominant TI because it's like because if you're defining the functions, it's like so you end up in the opposite place. So the sensory introverts are a little bit controversial. So we'll talk about them in future, right at the end. But I mean, in about a year because they are confusing.
Oh man.
But here, this idea of the social mission block is a little bit like Kersey's role variant, in that it's an idea of what the person is, what their preferences are best at, but they can adapt to other things. So we've got here, contribute to society, showing their specialization. So, for example, if we think of ENFP and we do them as NEFE, then it's like you could say that they are like the champion and they're using the FE to champion their cause.
Yeah. Now I would say the gasoline in the engine for the cause comes from the introverted feeling.
Yeah.
But the extroverted feeling is what they use with the outside world to inspire people and motivate people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I will, and then we'll talk. And then Victor has related the model. Now I don't know how much. I think he's done it as an analogy in terms of he's sort of gone like this. People believe in the tote model, so what I'll do is I'll relate it to the tote model. But you see, certain people might take it literally. I don't take it literally about the tote model, but it's like he's sort of like the tote model has 4 stages. Well, then my model can have 4 stages. And if you object to my model having 4 stages, then you've got to object to the tote model. So maybe he's going a little bit like that. You know, in order to catch people out by being inconsistent. So the idea being, do you know about the tote model, Carol?
No, please say a few words.
Right, then. You have the idea in the tote model is you have the thing that actually the tote model here would start out as this one, the launcher one. Tote model, right. I actually have a graphic on the tote model. As soon as we have more
Are
time.
you saying TOTE, Ben, the tote model?
Yeah, test, operate, test, exit. I've just
Okay,
got to find it. Just going to look through my graphics. I didn't put it across. Oh, there it is. All right. 1, 2, drag across. Oh, what I'm going to do is going to be right. I'm just going to drag that. My dragging is not working well. Just going to copy. Oh no! I moved it to the waste bin. Yeah, I'm using a paste one file. There it is. Right, go up there. This will be the tote model right at the end. Right, this is the tote model. This is from NLP, of which Carol did a course on that back in the day.
Yes, sir. 18-month course on back in the day. It was fabulous.
Yeah. Right, and I don't know if the tote model was. Now, apparently, this was come up by a guy a little bit after back in the day. I don't know. I don't know how far back in the day goes, because apparently the guy that came up with the tote model was a little bit late, maybe the 80s. I don't know, because it was like a different guy that added some new stuff. But did you get that? Get the process there?
This kind of makes sense to me. Yeah, I studied with that woman every Monday night for 18 months. It was fascinating. She had studied with people in New Orleans, and I mean, she was incredible intuitive too. So she was a natural at it. It was just absolutely fascinating how you could change, how to help shift someone's state, like get them out of the grip of a negative, painful memory. I mean, she would have them sitting right in front of us, and she would change. She would tell me how you remember it, and then she would change. Like if they saw it as a brightly colored picture in front of them, she would have them turn the color black and white. She would have them move the picture behind. I mean, Ben, it was fascinating. You could watch the change in their face. You could see that what she did really worked for people. It was just mind-boggling. And it was about being able to change your state, not being stuck with something overwhelming you, how you could take action, and sometimes with professional help, but even you learning to do this could anchor your own resources and change your state and not get stuck.
How does this relate to like moderate to severe trauma?
I think you may need. I think she could help with trauma, but I think there's known even more now. I've been seeing things on Facebook. I'm this close to buying the video series on the audio series on modern brain and trauma, healing trauma. I think we know more now than back when I studied NLP about that. But I'm sorry, Ben, but this just made me think. This is kind of the thing I saw her do over and over again. About trying to help somebody get to their inner resources and change their state so they could be more empowered to take positive action.
When you said there that I'm just about to buy it, that made me think, oh, well, Carol's got a high bar for buying stuff. She's really got to really develop that TE, but it's really got to tick a lot of boxes to like make a purchase, rather than just being impulsive. Right, so...
I think I just got insulted, but Ben's so nice about it.
No, you didn't. You were complimented by business logic. You know, it takes a lot to make you buy something.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Right. So I think I've got the. Right. Okay. Right. So again, creative function. So the idea is that it helps to implement the dominant function. So, for example, ESFPs using FE to be the center of attention or expressing themselves. We see that ENFPs using it Right, execution. So people can see that. People can read that for themselves. I don't need to read it out for them. What I can do is then go to this list, and we can discuss the creative function across the types.
Okay, please. That'd be good.
Right, so... Right, so we've got here ESXX types. It makes sense that all sensory extroverts should be good at extroverted sensor. They're sensors and they're extroverts, so they're directed towards the world. So it makes sense that they should be good at it, and that should be reflected in the model. Think that's fair enough, Carol?
Sure. Yeah, yes, Linda Behrens is a TI, so she would probably pick some more bones at that than I will, but I'm happy to go with that. She would say there are differences in whether it's dominant and how well we've put time, energy, and effort into developing that talent. She would say some of us do it better than others. It's not all equal, but yeah. That said,
I actually agree with Dario about that the strength of the creative function comes out in how well developed the person is. Or
there
what
you
subtype they are. So, for example, me, INTP, I'm a bit more NE than NI. So, the NI I wouldn't say is that well developed in myself.
Okay. Well said. Well said.
Oh, thank you for saying it was well said. As I was criticising myself. Right. So we've got that there. Even the Kersey profile, it writes about ESFJ, about them using emotional pressure. I remember asking Victor this, and when he said emotional pressure, I was rather surprised. But then when I thought about it, yes, they can really stand up for themselves. And Kersey wrote about the ESFJ can come down heavily on their children. If their children
I've really seen examples of this in both ESFJs and ESFPs, though approached in different ways. Like in ESFPs, when they don't feel safe or don't feel someone's on their side, really incisively making fun of them and jumping at them. And in ESFPs, I'm not sure what the I'm not sure, but in ESFPs, the incision, and in ESFJs, the criticism and the speed of criticism and the unwillingness to even consider that they may be wrong or that they may not have a reason, because ultimately it comes to replace it. Feeling.
Yeah, and in the Kersey ESTJ profile, there's a lot of stuff in there about enforcing the rules and discipline, and that looks a bit more like the SOCIONICS definition of SE, Carol, which is about willpower and exerting yourself in action. Whereas I think in America they want to make extroverted sensing look a little bit nicer.
Yeah, here, what I'm hearing here is temperament theory. ESFJ and ESTJ are all about appropriateness and pillars of society, and we would want our kids to be in line because we have to be responsible parents, and the way you're responsible parents is you teach kids to color within the lines and to obey the rules and that sort of thing. So that's what, my ears are using that, hearing that there. Yeah.
But also if you see, say, ISTJ, I was looking at the ISTJ profile, and it didn't have stuff in there about enforcing the rule. In fact, that was the key difference between the two profiles. ESTJ will use aggression and enforce the rules and get up in someone's face more than the ISTJ, typically.
Well, actually, and I would agree with that, the difference between one's more comfortable and ESTJ would be an in-charge style, would move to rapid decision and rapid action, and boom, they would take action. ISTJ would want they're in chart the course. Couldn't come up with it. Chart the course style, which means instead of push toward, they move back away from and take time to think. Yeah. That said, my mother is an ISTJ, but she's got a little tweak of ESTJ in her, and I think she's Enneagram 8. So when somebody she managed a tape library as an adult, and nobody broke those rules, Ben. I mean, she was right up in those programmers' face. They referred to her as the witch in the tape library, and I'm editing that. And she didn't care because she knew it was a federally mandated, federally governed bank. Banks are highly regulated over here, and there were rules, and none of those smart-ass programmers were going to get their way with her tapes. And
Right.
boy, she flipped into an Enneagram 8, and you would have thought she was an ESTJ when she was enforcing rules. So I
Yeah.
think they just do it in a quieter, sterner way, but not as loud a way. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, we need to remember that, I'm telling myself this all the while, that people are not the types, they resemble the types. Especially INTPs very much will confuse the theory with reality. And like they do too much like generalization and stuff. And like it's like, you know what you said about Kersey? If you INTPs do get declarative because of deduction. And it's because we get overconfident with that function. You see, we think we can apply logic to real people. Now in economics, now Kersey was Austrian as well, because his son said that he and his dad would talk about Austrian school of economics, but that's beside the point. Right, here we go. Dario is also an Austrian, so there you go. Right.
I did not know that either one of them were Austrians. That's fascinating.
Yeah, Dario's a massive Austrian. Right, because what I did.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Right, in case if people want to look because. What? Pardon?
As opposed to, don't worry.
Yeah, Austrian, as in someone who follows the Austrian School of Economics. Right, so ENXX.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. Sorry.
Right, so we got here ENXX. Because the reason why I asked was because there seemed to be some similarities between some of Kersey temperament theory and between praxeology, which is like the central logical theory of Austrian School of Economics, which can predict economic behavior through logic, and such as each transaction must be mutually beneficial if there's no force involved, or perceived as mutually beneficial. You know, when you buy that crap, you think you're getting a good deal, but you might have buyer's remorse. Right. Anyway, so ENXX. So I put here. So it makes sense that everyone who is intuitive and extroverted, that they should be good at NE, whether they value it or not. But in ENTJs can spot opportunities, and ENFJs can use NE to explain. Do you agree with that, Carol?
Well, from my 8-function teaching, ENFJs use introverted intuition, not extroverted, and ENTJs use introverted intuition, not extroverted. That said, I do know ENTJs can spot opportunities. I'll have to think about ENFJs, because when I think about Oprah, I kind of think about Oprah doing a bunch of extroverted feeling talking.
Yeah, but this is that thing about the creative function. It's a strong, unvalued function.
I'd agree that they like to explain things to people, and they have a sense of what it's head, and a lot of that sense is informed by their feeling. They often struggle to eloquently and concisely explain it. So they'll explain it in a way that appeals to the emotions of the other people. It'll take a lot of time for the other person to have a clue how they're talking about.
So, can I ask a
Rachel,
question?
that makes sense to me, Rachel. Sorry.
For the EN part, where the ENTJs can spot opportunities, could it be that seeing opportunities and knowing it's an opportunity is a rational thing to decide, and so maybe it's the TE part that's actually saying this is a good opportunity in those ENTJs, and not necessarily NE?
I think what's happening is it's ideas, things pop into the ENTJ, because I recently read the ENTJ profile, but you see it was a bit Google Translate, and Google Translate's getting better, but I have to sort of like decipher what's going on because it's not been translated yet by, either Maria or Helena, and it's.
Do you have any?
Pardon?
Rachel?
I have a really strong sense of why I think this is the case from doing the kind of beneficiary shift.
Rachel, dear, we can't hear you now, but we could hear you before, so something has changed because we used to could hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now
that's better. That's better. Thank you.
Go on.
So sorry. So I have like a lot of clarity as to why this is doing the beneficiary test. Shift. And essentially, sorry, am I speaking to you?
essentially what I experienced was ENTJs have a lot of clarity about what they're looking for and what their focus is on. So when you have a focus in your mind as to what you're looking for, the prism of your experience is filtered through that. So you'll be unconsciously have your retinal activation system, reticular activation system activated. So around you, you'll see things that are relevant to what you're aiming for. Whereas perhaps other types either won't be, because they'll also have any of that space, that awareness of everything going around, whereas other types will either have less awareness or less focus.
Yeah, you sound a bit bad there, Rachel. I tried turning you up, but okay.
Now?
Now.
Oh yeah, Rachel. I think when you point your face down, your voice gets in the mic really well. I think when you turn your face up to speak, we lose your voice.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. That's perfect, dear.
So what I was saying, sorry, I'm really sorry about that. What I was saying was, I think it has to do with the level of focus of the ENTJ, where they have a lot of clarity as to what their qualifications, like what they're looking for in a situation, or what their focus or their goals are. And because of that, their reticular activation system, whilst they are aware of everything going around them, subconsciously it's filtering, it's very, very clear. So they will pick up on details of their environment that are relevant to the thing that they're searching for. And because they're very clear about what they're searching for, and they're able to do that very effectively. Whereas other types either are searching but aren't clear about what they're searching for, like the ENFP, or aren't searching as much. Don't have that much kind of infiltration of stuff from around them. Have less any generally.
That's why I think they could have an opportunity, because they know what they're looking for.
Well, what I'll do is, because we do have extra time today, what I'll do is I'll show the NE ENFJ. So
Wait,
if you want to carry on, that's okay.
Can I say one more thing before you leave here?
Yeah,
And it takes me about the ENXX. Dario has a rather humorous thing he says about extroverted thinking and introverted intuition. He's an INTJ.
Yeah.
He says that we just pretend to be rational. He said what really happens is our introverted intuition throws something up from the depths.
Yeah.
And then he said we paddle like hell for our extroverted thinking to make rational sense of it and defend it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's laughing at himself when he's saying this, but I'm thinking that I had a PT who was at the age of 20, a friend of mine. He was at the age of 24. He was the CEO of a blended medical practice. I think that only happens if you're an ENTJ. He was an amazing young man. And when I described to him about introverted intuition, extroverted thinking, he said, that really makes sense to me. I talked about introverted intuition being just that sense of knowing, but not knowing how. And he said, Carol, that is so true for me. When you or another patient walks in the door, I just kind of look at you and I know where I'm going and what I'm going to do. He said, and what stops me and interrupts me is when somebody says, why did you decide to do that? He said, and then I realize I have to stop and I have to go inside and I have to go find my logical, rational reasoning and come out with a reason to tell the other person. Because introverted intuition has no articulation. Extroverted thinking has it. But he acts on the introverted intuition and then has to go find. He says the reason's there. He says, I just don't go looking for it. I look at it, I assess it, and boom, I know intuitively where I'm going. He said, but I have to stop and process it more to justify it and then to tell the patient. And it was fascinating to me because I was his PT client for about 4 years, and he and I had fantastic conversations because here he was an ENTJ, which meant he was pretty fascinated by the conversation, the psychological type stuff anyway. And I learned a lot from him talking to me about his consciousness as we, taught each other, his consciousness of the use of those different functions. I just wanted to add that.
Right. So this is how theoretically ENFJ uses NE.
And why are we not saying they use NI?
They
Am
do.
I
They do.
confused?
They do use it. That it's
Oh.
like I said. It's with this. It's used, but it's not valued. So it's like it's not
Okay.
used. So motivations associated with this are not sort of acted on. It's sort of used to enact
Got it.
the effort.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Right. Think. What do I need to do now? What do I think we'll go back to that sheet because the creative function. And I do agree with Dario that it depends on development.
Right.
And
Ben, have you found, since you also use extrovert intuition, have you ever found that someone who goes more strongly by introvert intuition, they don't really want to hear all your, but it could be this or it could be this or how about that? I mean, the extrovert intuition sounds kind of all over the place to them.
Yeah.
And I may think they haven't settled on the right solution yet, and I try to go, well, how about, what if we thought about blah, 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 blah? And they don't see that as helpful or expansive at all. They see that as getting in the way of what they've already decided is the right thing to do. So I've got friends who lead with introverted intuition, and I just back off and keep my mouth shut sometimes.
Well, maybe I should do that, but I can't help myself with Jonathan. Now, Jonathan has actually said in the Hangout, we spent about the first 40 minutes and we went through the NI chapter. He says, enough of this NE nonsense.
Did Jonathan say that?
Yes. And that's him actually being credited for a video on alternate history.
Oh, good for him.
Right, so we've got here. So we've got, yes, IN types. So
Okay.
here we go. So INXX types, I've just got to make sure that, INXX types are good at NI, whether they value it or not, or they can be. Theoretically, they're good at it. I think it depends. I agree with Dario that it depends on development. So, for instance, the INTP that has learned to like focus in life and not go NE too much, and the INFP that's focused as well. Although I think that is biased against the NE subtype.
It's extroverted intuition, and reining that in is the story of my life, Ben. I'm not laughing at you.
Right, so INXX types are good at NI, e.g. INTP and INFP can see the logical and ethical consequences. So intuition of time, intuition of causality. The downside of this is that this explains the break function. This is why INTPers and INFPers are such weirds, or tend to be such weirds, and from the point of view of ESTP. The downside is that it inhibits SE, because SE, according to Dario, is immersing yourself in the present context, which means you can't think about the consequences if you're reacting instinctively to the. So, for example, I saw in a program instinctively an ESTP Russian, his girlfriend was like being how should we say, propositioned by somebody in. Now, it was part of a documentary, but he still instinctively went to challenge the guy, not knowing how big the guy was, and there's other people working in the garage there as well, so it was like 3 against 1. Whereas an INTP might case things out, maybe bring along a few extra bring along some extra help, that sort of thing. Think about the consequences.
Yeah, I do see. I have a ESFP friend from since I was 5 years old, and yeah, it's all about in the present moment right now, and she would have to like stop and go into another mode entirely to think about long-term consequences. It's just not there in the present moment, and that makes sense that the long-term consequences do not exist in the present moment.
Now, this one for the IS types, so all types that are sensing types and introverted types, they're good at SI related things. They're good at these things where, like, good at visual memory, all of this, whether they're ISFJ, whether they're ISJ or ISP, they're good at those things. And Dario has shown lots of activity at the back of the brain for, say, ISFP and ISTP. And we'd interviewed someone with ISFP preferences, Imogen. She said before her brain injury, I mean, she's still like really smart after her brain injury, and she's got like new abilities. But she said before then, she could literally, it was like she was some kind of cyborg where she could like see what was written on a page and turn the page.
Oh, wow.
Because she had such a good like photographic memory.
So you're saying her brain injury made her a mere mortal like the rest of us?
Yes, but she's like still really smart, and it's like I always say like Imogen as an example of like ISFP, and because we've done a few hangouts with her.
Ben, to support a lot of what you're saying here, the type community used to think that it was a rather primitive model that you developed your dominant function, then your second one, then your third, blah, blah, blah. Well, they've come to a much more complex understanding of that now, which Linda Behrens now teaches. You develop your first, and then it's closely related to the fifth. It's opposite. And you develop your second one, and it's closely related to the sixth. And you do all that before you get to your third or your fourth. So it supports what you're saying, that even if you lead with extrovert intuition, you go down there and grab some introverted intuition development too. Those actually happen sooner than the original models thought they did, and that we have more access to those than was thought at one time.
Right, now, is she using that kind of model where it's like basically just a mirror image at the top? Right. So
Well, we do use that model, but she doesn't say it's 1 through 8. It's you develop 1 and that really touches into 5, and you develop 2 and that really touches into 6, and then you get to 3. And the old model just, no, I'm sorry, was that not clear?
Oh yeah, you sound. It was just that when you say position 5 in her model, and in the model that they generally, I get the impression that in MBTI they sort of like do. They do like the old model, the original model across the top. So like the valued functions, TINE, SIFE. So dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, inferior, and then the bottom row is like just the mirror images.
Yes. I'm used to seeing them all 8 up. Yes, I get it now. Exactly. That's right.
Now,
yes.
The reason why she may have come to that conclusion is that Linda Behrens has INTP preferences.
Absolutely.
According to Model G, people are always thinking about that function a lot, but here's the thing, they don't have a lot of energy for it. So
I can believe that. Right.
So INTPs can be very good at TE, like the theory of TE, but they don't really have the. Generally, it's hard to get the. I love how in Kurz's profile of INTP it says, in order for an organisation to get their most out of an architect rational, it is best to provide them with an efficient support staff to capture their ideas as they emerge.
That's
a whole support staff. We're that creative.
Ben, I have a dear friend who actually got certified in type with me years ago. She's ENTP preferences, and she's been in software sales her whole career. She loves the challenge of sales. And she told me, I was describing to her once I'd gone off and learned the 8 function model, the difference between introverted thinking and extroverted thinking. And I talked about extroverted thinking and the bullet point and linear and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to do this then and that then. And what are we committing to? And she said, oh, my God, I know that it drives me nuts. She said, do you know what I do in the meeting when they get to doing that? I said, what? She said, I throw a monkey wrench in the works because I just can't stand it anymore. So the TE really does get on her TI nerves if they go on with it too long.
That might be a development thing. Or so, for example, I don't think that, as you know, type is not completely even.
Right.
You know, there's patterns there. So, for example, Kurz's ENTP profile he's got the role variant of the inventor. And whilst I do believe that most inventors are ENTPs, only a small percentage of ENTPs are inventors, because they've not got the necessary development of TE to like stick with something, to like take that brilliant idea and to concentrate on it and get the business. So, for instance, someone like I'm 99% sure that Nikola Tesla's best fit type was ENTP. He even lied his head off. I mean, come on, when you're saying that you have a death ray that can destroy whole armies, I think you may be slightly exaggerating.
Was he exaggerating or was he losing it? I mean, isn't there? I don't know what it was.
I think 100% genius and 50% BS artist, which is most ENTPs.
Yeah, because he didn't sleep, right? I mean, after a certain amount of lack of sleep, aren't you delusional?
Yes, seriously, that's dangerous. It's dangerous to not sleep. Literally, mentally dangerous to not sleep.
I actually think, though, Victor's mentioned this, and this might be something that's true. Maybe EJs can get by on less sleep.
I've heard about this thing called polyphasic sleep, which apparently is like more efficient for the brain. I'm so interested about it.
It can work for some people, but for other people, like say in the military, they try to train up soldiers so that because they might not get a full night's sleep. But for a lot of people, and especially me, polyphasic sleep's not a good thing. It really does depend on the person.
Yeah, I know an ENTJ college professor who's a dean now, and he's gotten by on 4.5, 5 hours of sleep for like 40 years. And he's a really smart guy and a dean at a college, and kids love him. He wins teaching awards. Evidently, the human mechanism that is his body and his brain can really perform on 5 hours of sleep a night. And I am so in envy of that.
Well, not to do with stress levels, but to do with how very much focus. If we're extremely stressed, then our focus is much harder to focus on what we need to focus. Whereas if we're in a complete state of zen, we don't expend so much energy thinking about things we don't need to be thinking about, because my brain goes into hyperdrive trying to be dangerous.
Having said that, you know I said that about the EJs? Half of the EJs suffer stress problems. ENTJs suffer stress problems. So maybe, if they slept more, they wouldn't kill themselves with stress.
I just thought that's because they were type A's.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they think. I mean, part of it going into that. And so they do tend to have those, and that's part of the theory in socionics that ENTJs and ENFJs are SI break. And so trickster function. So the break function is like trickster in BB.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the translation.
Right. Farah, you're friends with Maria, aren't you?
Yeah.
Could you ask her on Facebook, hey, would you mind joining this hangout?
Yeah. Yeah, give me a sec.
Cool. Can see if she's available, because we've got we've got the ET types. Oh, so yes, this is the idea that once they're developed, ENTPs and the STPs, they can do stuff with TE. You can see them do well in business when they're focused, when they're developed. So I agree with Dario on that it's the function of development.
Ben, I know I have a colleague who's very successful ENTP businessman, but he jokes that when he goes to a meeting, at the end of the meeting, he says, now we have to answer the questions on my wife's list. And they all laugh because his wife is ESTJ. So he literally carries the extroverted thinking on a list with him to go into a business meeting so that his ENTP self doesn't leave the meeting without the ESTJ questions answered. So they're like the perfect business combo. Does that make sense, Support, what you're saying?
It makes sense. I'm trying to categorize it as well, but I'll have to do that later.
Well, I'm just saying he didn't develop it in himself. He married it.
Oh,
But he
right.
and that's one way to do it. If you look at the Strengths Finder stuff, they say, one of the best things you can do is actually partner with the piece that you don't do well. So he partners with an ESTJ. They're married and they're business partners, and he jokes about he would never come up with the in conclusion questions by himself, but his wife would. So so it's kind of like a relationship building business joke. Oh, by the way, now we have to get Carly's questions answered, and everybody laughs, and then they all answer his wife's questions
Gotcha.
for him, and that works perfectly for them. They're very successful as a business couple.
Right, so we got also probably the ones with more TE will have like stronger. There's a big correlation between TE and Enneagram Type 3. There'll be some patterns, some traits, there will be overlap there because the 3 is very much about success.
I was going to say, remind me what 3 is. I don't know the Enneagram numbers as well as you do. What is the 3?
3 is the achiever. They're really focused on success. It tends to be a bit more STJ-ish because it's more towards what society deems as successful.
Right. What does ENTJ tend toward? Do they tend toward 3 as well?
They're a little bit of a combo between 3-ish traits and 8-ish traits. I don't think they're the full 8 because I think that the ESTP is the full 8. But ENTJ, and especially reading Victor's profile of ENTJ, they have quite a bit of 8-ish traits because they've got that tertiary SE. And also maybe it's just like, especially with ENTJ, and then the ENTJ females will tend to act like the ENTJ males, and it's like they tend to be aggressive and macho. But they try to project that image. So maybe that's a 3-ish, but it's still just a pattern thing rather than someone is a 3 or is an 8.
Right.
I do think they're more in. It depends whether they're more interested in success or power. Because the 8s are more interested. If the 8 is well developed, it's more towards responsibility and protection.
Got it.
They want the power for the responsibility.
Otherwise, undeveloped 8 is just because I want my way.
Yeah, it's just Trump.
Like somebody I was not going to mention.
Yeah. Trump is like 100% 8, 100% ESTP.
Yeah.
Right. And then the EF types. It makes sense. Everyone who is extroverted and a feeler is going to be able to do FE type behavior.
Absolutely.
So we've got ESFPs. They can use the put on the charm. They might not necessarily bake everyone a cake and put everyone before themselves, but they can use the extroverted feeling to make themselves a center of attention and more popular.
Actually, ENTPs can go use that tertiary FE and be quite charming. Paul, how can I blank on Paul's last name? Tigger. No, Paul Tigger said that he used to be for 10 years, he was a jury consultant. He used type and temperament in jury consulting.
Yeah.
He worked for defense attorneys. He said the prosecutors had enough money. He said he helped people in defense. And he said an ENTP would get on the stand, charm the daylights out of the attorney, and the attorney be walking back toward the table, mouthing to him, "That's my guy, that's my guy." And Paul is going, "That is so not your guy. That guy is the nuclear bomb on that jury. He's going to use his FE on that stand to charm your socks off. He's going to get back in that room and go pure introverted thinking for making the decision, not going to take any special circumstances for your client into account.
Yeah.
He's your nuclear bomb. Do not let him get on your jury."
Yeah,
so
right.
Paul's thinking was, don't let those charming ENTPs on your jury.
I mean, charming is not the adjective I would use for ENTPs. I would use
When
it with ENFPs.
When they want to be, they can be manipulatively. ENTPs can be charming. They're not.
Wow, let
you know,
me show you Victor's profile of the ENTP. But this is rivalry though between the NTPs. We don't think much of ENTPs.
there you go.
I'll show you the
There you
profile.
go.
It's
I
quite
know,
insulting, actually.
The
Wait a minute, Farrah's trying to say something.
I was just gonna say, I think the ENTPs and the ESTPs can both be charming. I think they use the FE, but I think they use it in a way to get what they want and not necessarily,
Right,
you know.
that's it. That's
yeah.
what I meant. Yes, I think that's it. I don't think you're right. It's not innate, natural. I go around the world that way. They use that. They can be quite effective and go there when they have a meaning, a purpose, and
Yeah.
a point. There's something they want to get happen, and they'll go there and use it.
Something, that kind of thing. You know.
But usually I've seen like ENTPs, like with the FI break, they're just saying inappropriate stuff all the while. So let's have a look. Let's see if there we go. So if I show you FE minus, now of course this is a little bit of the functional tail wagging the dog, because it's like, oh, it's FE minus, so maybe I've got to put. But certainly, I think maybe there's a difference between older and younger ENTPs, where the really smart ENTPs will probably learn how to be charming, study all the books, study all the NLP, really sneaky methods for them. You've got ethics, Carol. You're not using NLP in a sneaky way.
Oh,
So,
I know better than that. I believe in karma, Ben. Anybody who uses this stuff to trip other people up, bad karmic move.
So do you think that this can be true of some less well-developed younger ENTPs, this FE minus, their trolly behaviour? They like a good argument and a debate.
I would see this as undeveloped, yeah. But the two NTPs I'm talking to you about were both very intelligent, very educated, and very experienced in the business world, and I think to have been a success, one in sales and the other one in sales too. He's built his own company.
Right.
So I think they're just both very highly developed ENTPs, and their extroverted feeling charm, I mean, it doesn't just pour and gush out all the time, but they call it up when they need it.
Yeah, I mean, like in this one here, I mean, Victor really lays it on here where he makes them look a bit bad. Like if you have a look at this.
Yeah. Now, this is interesting. FI would be their seventh function with a trickster function. So, yeah, the trickster can be difficult for all of us.
Yeah. And even in the Kersey one, because I've recently gone through the Kersey profile, it mentions, like, there's things in there that are FI break. Because I recently put it in our Facebook group, Humanitarian Socionica Society, where I marked it up just like the ENFP profile, and it said, oh, this bit looks like FI trickster. Right, anyway. So,
interesting.
Get back to
Very
that.
interesting.
So, anyway, do you see what happens, folks? When we don't have a time limit, we just go more NE. In
our defense, nobody is just shooting off into the ozone. We're always going off what the other person said and relating it. In our defense, right, Farrah?
That's
our defense.
And we are.
Thank you for your support, Farrah.
We are drilling down on the creative function, like trying to make the best case.
Did we lose Rachel? I'm afraid Rachel wasn't feeling well and we lost her.
Oh, yeah. Right. Oh, she's actually said that. Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks for the update. So we got here. So yeah, all the IN types can do. You see, that's hard to describe because I don't really know. If we say NI is like the unconscious, like being in touch with the unconscious, transfer like the way NLP sees it. So anyone who's like introverted, abstract, introverted and intuitive, you can see how they're going to have access to that process when they're being introverted and intuitive. It's just like when I said with the IS types.
Ben, what my sense of it is with them is that they just kind of use it all the time. It just comes up all the time. Whereas as an extrovert intuitor, I think I've got a lot of NI going on too, but I don't seem to have any control over it. It just pops up out of nowhere sometimes, and I don't seem to be able to make it come up.
Right.
It just like gives me gifts sometimes. Whereas I think people who live there have a more conscious access to it than I do, more continuous access to it than I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the theory is that the NE DOMs have like control NI, where it's like they have access to it. It's just that it's opposite to your dominant function. So it's like, in order for you to do the NI thing, that means you can't do the NE thing, because it gets pushed into the background.
And you know what I think? The way I think my insides make that possible is I think when I go to my spiritual stuff, I willingly go into NI and turn NE off. Whereas going about in the world, you better believe I unconsciously pick extroverted intuition and plan on that to save the day for me, because as an ENFP, I do not have enough ducks marching smartly in a row that I'm constantly using my extroverted intuition to solve problems or try to keep me out of a problem.
And you're also temperament as well. Jungian temperament, in that being EP, you will have access to extroverted sensing as well. And so you'll be able to switch between NE and SE. Even though you might be turned off by SE, it's like something you can use because you're an extroverted perceiver.
You know, Ben, you're teaching me something there, and I've thought about this before. What I think I would have said for a long time that wasn't true, just because I didn't know it well enough. I can be so easily overwhelmed by too much incoming sensing. Like, I'd go to a mall and I'd leave before I'd bought what I'd wanted to, because it was like it's going rah, 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 rah. All this incoming sensing stuff was overwhelming me, and I didn't understand it. But I got in the car and went home because I was overwhelmed. But I absolutely love dancing, love and adore dancing. One of the reasons to come to the planet. And I don't think you can love dancing and not have access to extroverted sensing. So I think it's just available to me in a very limited way. What, dear?
Are you HSP?
I'm sorry, you're going to explain to me what HSP is.
A highly sensitive person?
You know, I think I am. Thank you. Yes, I'm afraid
I am.
I am.
That's what you could say.
Well, the reason why I asked that is because your experience at the mall seems familiar to me too. And
yeah, I've read some of that literature, and I think you're right. I think I am.
Yeah.
And I'd rather not be, and I'd rather not say it out loud. I don't mind saying it to you, because our culture, our America, I don't know about in England, Ben, but the American culture is very antagonistic toward this. Somebody would call us a delicate snowflake and really make fun. There's not any compassion in American culture for this, but I think it's a real thing. I imagine you think it's a real thing too?
Yeah, I used to, actually I still do sometimes, cover my ears, when sirens go by and there's like nobody else is doing this. They just all tolerate it. For me, it's just too much.
Just too much, yeah.
But I think I'm weird, so, but I also have the emotional HSP, so I don't know if you have that as well, but.
You and I have to talk in the future. Ben, thank you for letting me and Farrah bond over this.
Okay. Right. And then here's a big one. The IT types. And when you look at like correlations of Enneagram type and MBTI type, a lot of ISTJs and ISTBs can resemble Enneagram type 5. But what I would think is the sort of things that they would be interested in, it's going to be generally more practical. Right, so it's like ISTJs, it's like knowledge on a practical level. Maybe like my mother wanting to know about things on Wikipedia and historical things on a concrete level. So the temperament thing will still come through. Because it's like, if you're an introvert and you're a thinker, you're probably going to be reading books or want to read some non-fiction. Given the opportunity.
It's funny, Ben, my mother is ISTJ all the way, but she is a big novel reader. And I truly believe she uses novels to escape because my mother's a very disciplined, very hardworking ISTJ, always. I mean, she worked a full-time job. She put home-cooked meat and 3 vegetables on the table every night. I mean, just all the diligence. And I think the reading novels was her escape from being the incredibly disciplined, diligent ISTJ she was her whole life.
Yeah.
But she did not read nonfiction. She only read fiction, and I think that was escape.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah. I shouldn't have added that. I was a little bit sloppy there, but because the SI DOMs especially, like my mother reads novels, and it's like the sensory world for them, like they can imagine smells easily, such and such. Go on, Farrell.
Ben, what do you think about science fiction, though? My take is that they don't have tolerance for science fiction. It has to be more historical, reasonable, everyday fiction. What do you think?
Well, I'll let Farrah say her point, and then
Oh, sure, please, Farrah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a lot of feelers also, depending upon your interest, because you know how there's a creative feelers, and then there's a more scientific feelers. And, you know, because I pretty much preference nonfiction because it's useful. And I want to learn a whole lot. But I have read fiction, but when I do, it does tend to be maybe a little bit more, I suppose, based on reality, but it still has a bit of magic to it, like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. There's elements that are real, but it also has that fantasy that is, it's very attractive. So,
and maybe that's the escape portion. Maybe that's the getting away from the hardship of every day or the duty of every day. That's the escape factor.
Yeah, I wish magic was real. I think that's what it was. It was such a disappointment when I found out that it wasn't, and I think I'm trying to get that back. So.
Okay, a topic for another day, Ben, and then I will shut up about this and let you get on. I have never been able to figure out who it is that likes science fiction and who doesn't, because I can't ever, in the people I ask, seem to get a pattern. So, topic for another day, Ben. I won't take us off on this.
So, for instance,
I would love to know that.
So, for instance, it tends to be like different reasons, and like so. A friend of mine, Jeff, ESFP preference. He likes Doctor Who, proper Doctor Who, the classic Doctor Who from last century, not the rubbish that we do now.
You mean the 1970s one?
Yeah, the 70s, the 80s, the 60s.
Okay.
Not this horrible 21st century stuff.
I think we always remember our first Doctor Who. Oh gosh, his big, I see his face. I'm blanking on his name, but I loved my first Doctor Who. And everybody else has just seemed like a substitute since my first Doctor Who.
Tom
or
Baker?
Tom something.
Tom
What?
Baker? Tom Baker?
God, Tom Baker. Yes, love Tom Baker.
Oh, ENFP. ENFP as heck, I reckon. Tom Baker. I agree with Jeff's typing of him. Yeah.
Oh, no wonder I loved him so much.
Yep. And then we got IF. So it's like INFJs and ISFJs can do the FI thing. What have I got there? Good at one-to-one relations and covertly guiding the ethics of their FI polar duals, ENTP and ESTP.
Okay, now you think that's funny because you know what that means. You want to explain to me what that means so I can laugh too, Ben?
Well, ENTP and ESTP is all morally dubious. So, for instance, ESTP, Donald Trump, and ENTP is usually troll is dishonorable people who are disloyal. But they can be developed. So once they learn that, it's good to be nice because it's better for their reputation that way.
Right.
And they get more positive feedback. So it's smarter to be nice.
I actually do remember he didn't work on our team for long, maybe a year. It was an ENTP on our team, and he actually did. Ben, he had FE charm out the wazoo. Sense of humor. He always used it in a sense of humor way, not a endearing, sweet way, but a sense of humor way. But we liked him. He was charming. But when he would get bored with a meeting or decide he just didn't want to be helpful, I didn't realize the pattern until it happened about 3 times, but he would wait till the team got this close to closure, and then he would lean back in his chair with his arms folded across, says, "Well, what about?" And he would throw something out that just undid everything we'd spent 45 minutes assembling. And it took me a while to realize he didn't care about this meeting. He didn't care about this thing he'd been assigned to. And he actually got a project taken away from somebody once because he did. I don't think he meant to. I think he was just not caring.
Yeah.
So he was just entertaining himself by throwing the monkey wrench in. But what I got to see is how differently he behaved when he was responsible, because all of a sudden it got taken away from the other person and given to him. And all of a sudden he was Mr. Responsibility. His behavior changed utterly when it was no skin off his back to when now his head was on the line, and he turned into a very responsible, do-it-right person. But boy, he just pulled the rug out from under this other person, not caring. You know, he was just bored. He was just entertaining himself. There was no ethics involved in that behavior at all.
Yeah, so it's like, that's a very good example there, Carol, the nuances involved in trying to explain FI trickster. And I think the Kersey ESTP profile does a very good job of explaining the FI trickster. And it's like, he is like doing a profile of Donald Trump, and it's like, and it says things spouses may feel like they are ornaments and possessions and things like that.
Yep.
And when he puts in real estate magnets.
Yeah, that's right.
Right then. So now we're going to go to. We might now actually go to the proper ENFP profile. Yes. Okay, we've done the creative. We said it's a social mission block. So the creative function helps the person achieve their social mission. It certainly helps, say, INTPs and INFPs if they're focused with the NI, if they have a long-term vision and they're focused.
Right.
It helps ESFPs to use FE because it makes them less selfish, and it's like, and because ultimately it goes towards what they want, which is, yeah, they can have like even something that goes beyond type, beyond temperament. And when we look at like from real life, a lot of ESFPs are nurses.
Oh my God, my adopted sister, ESFP, is a retired nurse.
My sister's a nurse too, and she's ESFP.
Wow. Farah, mine was she spent like a year in the ER, but almost the whole rest of her career, until she got tired of nights and weekends, she spent in intensive care because she said it would have bored me to tears to work on a regular floor. She said, I recognized this as a nursing student long before she knew we talked about type. She said, I realized I would be bored to tears on those regular floors in the hospital. Yeah. I knew I needed something more. So you can imagine intensive care. For God's sakes, people die. Yeah. You have to monitor equipment. Awesome. She broke her nose. Yeah, she broke her nose one night on somebody's bed trying to fix some equipment in the dark. I mean, and Ben, I'm saying this because she's just this classic example of this ESFP who was in a that FI caring.
Yeah.
But also needed to pick the kind of nursing job she knew would have enough activity. That's and smart. I asked her once, Farah, I said, Jan, because, introverted feeling, it's overwhelming, the empathy sometimes. And I said, Jan, do you ever get overwhelmed with the feeling doing nursing? Because these people are in pain that you're helping. She said, oh, yes, it gets overwhelming at times. She says, I said, what do you do? She said, I shut down. I take myself off to the side. I get on the computer and I do the paperwork. She said, that's all I can do is just pull away from the people part for a little while and make the paperwork happen. She said, that gives me a break from all the feeling. And I thought, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant way to do that and get to stay in that profession. Because I don't think as an NF, I think it would kill me to do that. I don't think there'd be enough of me to drag home if I tried to do that.
I knew early on, my mom's a nurse too, and I knew early on that I could never be a nurse. It's just like, it's too painful to see other people suffer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why I work in the lab, like I can help people, but I work on their blood and not, not their actual, see their suffering. So.
Ben, I have talked with SFs and NFs and it's just a theory of mine, is that the reason there are so many more sensing feelers instead of intuiting feelers in like social services work is I think people who have an SF are able to shut it, more likely able to turn it off when they go home, and intuitive feelers don't have as good boundaries, and we carry it with us. And we can't survive in the kind of, the social work counselors in particular, they're dealing with just horrific situations with people. And I think that would so tear me up, I would not be useful. And I think I would have to steer clear of that. So I am grateful to those people, but I think they've got a mechanism in them that lets them do that in a healthy way that I just don't even have that capacity.
Yeah. My mom, she's an ISFJ, and she can do that. She
That's
has
right.
that.
Turn it off.
Did hospice nursing. I'm like, there's no way I could do hospice nursing. But I'm an ISFP. That's how I always test, but I can't turn it off. It just, I did a thing at a vet's office one time, and I couldn't do a vet anymore.
Well, that's introverted feel, and you're right. I should have been more clear. I think it's SFJ that are most of the social work practitioners. I think introverted feeling, whether it's SRN, I don't think you can turn off introverted feeling.
No.
There's no off switch. Ben, if you ever find the off switch in one of these charts or books or something, if you would please send out a red alert and tell me and Farah, we'd really appreciate it.
Oh, I know that when you have a talk, when you have certain things with, like, if you can have a discussion, like where Austrian school economics and libertarianism, you'll know this from chats with Dario, where we can come from like a strong TI point of view.
Right.
And like if it hits that FI point, doesn't matter how right we are, it's not going to stop them from feeling it. Oh yeah, there's another example. INTJs, most of them are super smart with TI. They don't value it at all, but they can rip up most people's arguments with the TI.
Oh yeah.
Good at creating a structure and a model. Oh yeah, so here's the example of what I did here is I think I showed this last time. These are the quotes from the Kersey ESFP profile that is FE type behavior. And I think those qualities, those quotes, you would also see them in ESFJ. But,
are we looking at ESFP here, Ben? I'm sorry, I can't see the top of it.
That's ESFP. Now this 3 is just what I did here, folks, is I wanted to I was a little bit sneaky trying to introduce bits of Model G into the Kersey temperament group, but without mentioning Model G at all. So that's why on here, I actually put gluten-free, nut-free, fee-fi-fo-fum-free. So no mention of functions on here, because that's what the Kersey people call the functions, fee-fi-fo-fum. And so what I did, I'll just talk about it. So what I did is I modeled the positions. Like that's position 1, that's position 5, and that's position 2, the creative position. And so I just thought, well, the functions here in ESFP, SE and FI, they're the ones that have motivations associated with them. So the valued FI in ESFP will create the instinctive kindness and generosity and helping people.
Because they are. My ESFP, she's like my adopted sister. We've been friends since we were 5, and her parents called me the adopted one, so I was half brought up with that family. And one time I got there for Christmas with them, and she came in first, and I hugged her mother, and I looked at her across the room going, and her mother looked at me. Her mother, I'm pretty sure, was an ISFP, a very quiet, gentle soul. And there was my ESFP friend just going around the room. And her mother looked at me, and she just beamed from ear to ear, and she said she just lights up, the whole room just lights up when she enters it. And it's true, Jan's energy and warmth, and she's an animal rescuer. She's rescued golden retrievers for over 30 years, and then she accidentally started rescuing cats too. Didn't even know she liked cats, found out she could like them, but she just cannot resist rescuing animals, and she's a nurse. And when she comes, and family's one of her values, so between rescuing people and doing anything she could for value, that warmth just radiates in the room. I agree with everything you say here. Farah's smiling.
My grandma was an ESFP, and my sister, who I don't get to see very often, is an ESFP.
I tell you what, Farah, while you talk about them, I'll have a quick nature break. So keep
sure.
Go ahead, I'm listening, Farah.
I was just saying that they were so much fun, And my grandma, I remember her getting dressed up. She died when I was 6.
Oh,
But I remember her getting dressed up real fancy at night and going to play bingo.
that's great.
And she was just like, and she was dressed in these big boots. And I mean, very, very, at the time, it was pretty fashionable, you know. And my mom says she was just the life of the party.
Yeah,
Everybody
right.
loved her. And I think she's probably an Enneagram 7. That's what I'm guessing.
Right.
And my sister, she's the only one that I just had almost instant connection with, of all my siblings.
Right.
And it was, I'm not sure why, but I loved her. You know how like they have a little mischievous side to them?
Yes, they do. They're playful.
I love that mischievous kind of like little devious kind of to them. I don't have that to carry it through, but I like that kind of teasing about it.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know. It's just that they're infectious, and I need help getting me out of my shell. And they're the kind of people that do that.
Absolutely.
I love that about them. So yeah.
Right. So
It's funny you said last thing, Ben. It's funny you said your grandmother was. My mother's father was an ESFP, and he was a railroad engineer. And at church, this is the South, right? Big Baptist church. And this was back before everybody had a camera, but Granddaddy had a camera. And that was how he connected, is he went around, he was the church photographer and took all these, and he was like, had dancing eyes and a smile that could light up a room. And he was friendly and warm. And he was just like this Santa Claus walking around the Baptist church all the time. He was just precious. You could not smile when you were in my grandfather's presence. It was wonderful. And he was like a little kid his whole life. I really think he was like an ADD, never took medications, because he put 3 women in the grave, because I just think he was so high energy, nobody could outlive him.
Oh, well, I thought you were saying there's a little bit too much information there, Carol. You know,
No. All innocent deaths, but that he outlived 3 women, and I just think it's because he was just so full of energy.
Right then. So
it's your turn, Ben.
Right then. So there's 2 broad categories of ESFP in terms of using the FE. So it's like those who are well developed, and there's a little bit of a judgment there, but like those that, like you were saying there, the nurses, where they're using the FE in like, there's that kind of way. What we associate as FE kind of behavior, like being focused on the other person. It's a little bit cheeky to actually say FE is all about other people and FI is all about the self, because FI can be about other people. It depends on what your personal ethics are. It just means FI is subjective and FE is more societal, more objective in quotation marks. But there are other ESFPs that will use FE because it brings attention on themselves, because part of their temperament and their role variant is to be the performer. And it's hard to know with some of them how much is like what kind of FE you're going on there, because it depends on what their specific motivations are.
Right. You know what, Ben? I get it that a lot of them use the FE to get attention. I totally get that. I also think there's a certain amount of, they're just so high energy that sometimes they get attention just by being who they are, not even intending. And I see Farah nodding at that. Sometimes I think they just grab attention when they're not even trying to. They just can't help it. They're so kind of an attention magnet by being so energetic.
Yeah, they're attractive. It's almost like they make people come to them, as opposed to going out and like, I don't know, like getting the followers. They just kind of have them come to them. People can't resist it.
Yeah, who can resist that charm?
I don't know.
Well, I can manage to. But then theoretically,
that's your vulnerable function, right? I mean, SE is not good for me.
Although ENTPs and the ESTPs annoy me more, because I respect the FI in ESFPs. But that's an idea, Carol, that in socionics, as people get a little bit older, they develop the role function. This is a weakness, this thing that they want to improve. So in ESFJ, that would be TE. But I think ESFJ will develop TE for temperament reasons as well. So, for instance, it's like, now I'm in work mode. I should be better at this kind of thing. So certain types are more likely to develop their role function than others. partly because of environment.
So Ben, just so I can be properly forewarned, do ENFPs tend to annoy you?
NFPs.
ENFPs?
ENFPs, not as much.
Okay, that's lucky for me.
I just avoid talking politics with them. I don't talk politics with Rachel.
Do you think he would actually answer you honestly though if it did? Like, gotta keep the peace.
All right. So we got here. So part of the theory is optimum energy. It's not like the dominant function, which is like can be indulged, but it's the idea is that it's optimum energy, just enough to achieve the task. So, for example, here's an example. ESFP will use just enough FE to get what they want. In terms of but again, depending on the kind of ESFP. If they're using FE in a kind of a less well-developed way, or even if that's just the kind of in terms of if they are more in the performer role of, I'll be as expressive and use the persona and charm people just enough to help me get what I want. And Jeff has talked about how he loves attention, and attention is the thing that he loves more than anything. And it's not necessarily in a bad way; it's just what ESFPs love. If you watch The Crown, Carol, Princess Margaret, clear ESFP preferences.
Oh, that's why she kept getting in so much trouble with everybody.
And then we've got there's this idea that it's just used, and a little bit of theory coming in. The more complex the task, the more energy at its disposal. So it's like if the person's developing, they really so for if you think of an ESFP acting, they can draw on their FE energies to get the thing done or to make the sale. It makes sense. If you're strong at this function, you don't value it, but you use it in order to get the job done. The job done being determined by the lead function. So right. ESFJ might use extroverted sensor if, out of love, they're disciplining their children because they know what's best for them. And they can draw on their extroverted sensing to give their children a griller. Because they're doing it out of kindness. Right then. Although Rachel might say at sometimes ESFJs are not necessarily using extroverted sensing out of kindness.
I think Rachel came. Hey Rachel, we hope you feel better. Ben, I do have to ask something. It's 5:20. Excuse me. We've been on nearly 2 hours now. How much longer are we going?
We're going until we can go another hour.
I want to go hard. What's that thing that those sensory types do?
So what was that? I'm not quite hearing Rachel very well. I mean, if you're trying to unblock things, Rachel, not cover up any holes or.
I took my makeup
off.
Better.
That's better. I mean, not the makeup thing. I mean the sound.
My phone's about to die.
I'm probably gonna have to leave kind of soon.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Can we come to? Yeah. I probably need to. 2 hours is probably about my good limit too, Ben, for absorbing stuff for 2 hours. Can we come to some kind of wrap, and then you tell us where we start next time?
Well, we need to go through these bullet points, and then we can, and then if you give me about 10 more minutes, then we can wrap up.
Okay. For you, Ben, 10 more minutes.
Okay. Right. So, what do you think of those bullet points in the FE Plus?
And who are we? And I can't see the whole screen, so remind me who we're talking. Which type we're talking about here?
ENFP and
okay.
For other ENFPs and for you, Carl.
Okay.
If you click on my square, it should be visible.
The whole not receiving emotional feedback thing, I find that really difficult. I don't get offended. I'm just like, I get sad. I'm like, what did I do wrong? I guess that is offended, but I don't take it offense. It's just I get very disturbed by not receiving emotional feedback.
Yeah, that's part of the
I
FE.
find it very
Yeah.
That's part of the FE where the
That FE, Ben, you kind of nailed it. That FE stuff pretty much applies to me. It does.
oh, good old Victor, he nailed it. And Maria
that number
translated it into English. Go on.
Oh, bless her heart. She did well, as we say in the South. I had been something was said once about my being sincere, and a friend who is a very, gosh, what's the word? She's more wry in her humor. She looked at me and she said, "Yeah, you do come across as real earnest, Carol." And she did not mean that as a compliment. But I do think people do get that I'm in earnest, and I don't have trouble with trust in groups. So I appreciate
I think
that.
a lot of people who are like NFs, they kind of like, how do I explain this? They come along and they're like, oh, it's so wonderful. And other people are just there being like, there's sugar in the corner and it's melting everywhere. But it's one, I think it's one.
No, I think he's on target here, Ben.
Right, okay.
What does Farrah think?
I was thinking about how it relates to me, and it that fits me too.
Okay.
FE plus, yeah.
How about you,
I like the
Rachel?
dynamic of this group. I think this group is like very noticeably FE strong, and it's nice.
Oh, thank you. So what do you think of these? Do these bullet points fit you, Rachel, or?
Yeah, I think. Maybe I'm not that great with. I don't know. Yeah, no, all of them fit.
Well, Rachel, to respond to a point you made about number 4, that is something I think I had to learn to work out, was not being offended when I didn't get responded to in kind. I worked at a computer software company for years.
I don't have to offend. I get ruffled, but not offended. I'm not upset with the other person. I'm just like confused and want to understand.
Well, I would get offended when I was younger, and I had to learn to say, you know what, this isn't everybody's language. I need to let this go. And I kind of got used to expecting to not get it because I was
I was very used to not receiving emotional feedback. So not receiving emotional feedback didn't like upset me. I just felt like I needed to understand what was going on.
Right.
So like I get what you're saying though, because I've also been in like emotionally responsive environments, and like I think it's awesome that you worked on that. So
Right, so here's the idea of Victor's theory of the charges, where most of the time that you're in that, you can switch to the other one, but you have sort of a preference for one of the kinds, one of the versions of each function.
no, I'm on 1%.
Right. What we need is special ENFP phones with extra battery life. Right.
I know, right? And my phone doesn't even work properly.
Right. No. ESFP and the ENFP. So
This is very interesting, Ben, because this is new to me. That little thank you for putting up this paragraph here. This is new information for me.
yeah, it's part of Victor's theory. Sometimes it can, like with the sensory introverts, it can go into like tricky waters, but that's something to get to in about a year. When we start, like,
Thanks for preparing me, Ben.
Yeah. Because, so for instance, right, so the FE and the FE, so Victor is put it in, so for the FE plus, he sees it as like positive stuff, like being open with people, all the kind of way ESFJ. Now, when he wrote this, and it was like, that's the way ENFJ acts, David Kersey Jr. said, because I actually said he was married to an ENFJ, and did he say, does he have a happy marriage?
You asked that in person?
No, he said that. I mean,
oh, okay.
Kersey Jr. said, based on this definition, maybe the wife is not that happy. Because he thought that was because his mother is very kind and the teacher archetype, and he was saying that everybody likes his mother, and so maybe. But here's a key bit of theory though: the higher a function is in the stack, the more you can use both sides of it. So.
Oh, that makes sense.
So ENFJ can go to the other side, can go to easily. They can switch on the charm and go to FE plus. But quite a lot of times ENFJs might be, in it for their own personal ambition. Depends on how well developed. They are. Right, and then I've got some things on. There might be something in here on. I think that's pretty much SI and TE. There's nothing in there on FI. This is the table. E, ethics of emotions. Oh yeah, so we've got there joy, excitement, happiness, enthusiasm. And then E mine, anguish, indignation, dramatizing events, sarcasm, mockery. But like I said, the ENFJ can use FE plus as well. So the idea would be here, like, say INTJ, when they show FE, it tends to be more of this kind of FE than that kind of.
I believe that, yeah.
So, and then this is something on the way Dario defined. Did I do this? Oh yes, this is Victor's short definitions of the functions. I'll show this and then I'll show Dario's.
And why don't you send us that too, Ben? I would love to have that.
Okay. Right, so this is.
Talk to me about relationship ethics. This is kind of a new piece in here for me, dear.
Yeah, this is a little bit tricky because. It's the idea that it's like FPs, using MBTI terminology, are they know how they feel about everyone and everything in every relationship. And so it's almost as if how they, well.
I don't.
Oh,
I'm supposed to be an FP.
Yeah, maybe that's your creative FE getting in the way. I don't know. But
What?
But maybe that's more INFP.
People like, I like this, and I'm like, what is this liking thing? Surely you just do what other people like.
Really?
I was like, personal preferences? What are they? Like, I literally was completely boggled by them. People are like, I choose to do this because this is how I enjoy to use my time. And I'm like, I just do whatever I'm told to do or whatever everyone around me is doing. Like, what is that? And I'm supposed to be an ENFP.
That might be a cozy thing where NFs are cooperative, and part of them is cooperative, and then part of them they've got the authenticity. So there might be an inner struggle there.
Sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, the theory is that they know how to judge relationships because they have a feeling.
I think my mum
about...
just preferences. I think my mum thinks that I do have very strong personal preferences. I think that might be what she was why she was laughing.
Yeah, maybe. I think you do too. Right.
You're talking about relationships. If they've got really functioning FE, well-functioning FE, we're saying that would give you good effective behaviors in the relationship ethics. That makes sense to me.
If Jack Aaron once himself, ENTP, said that he treats everyone the same, and so it's like they're black and white. Like so,
I have really strong opinions about how correct behavior and how whether I approved of that the way they behaved. Is that like to do with how I feel about them? Because I had a very strong sense of what I would and wouldn't do according to what other people did and didn't do, and whether I wanted to be like that.
I think that's and that sounds like FI to me. I keep a lot of that to myself because I'm Southern and I'm taught not to, say things like that out loud. But I have a very strong internal FI monitor about how people should have behaved to each other. Ben, does that sound like FI?
Yeah.
I don't have a very strong sense. I didn't at the same age as I had a very strong sense of what I thought was like. I didn't have a very strong sense of like which car I wanted to drive in, for example, or like whether I wanted to play piano or sing. I didn't mind. It was whatever was going on at the time, like in terms of things. Yeah, but when we're saying in relation to people, I had a very strong sense of what I was going to do, what was in line with me, and whatever everyone else was doing wasn't necessarily relevant to that. I would do what was right for me, and I would, where I could, and I would do what yeah, I would judge other people as well.
Yeah, this is
And
that.
you know, I'm sorry, Rachel, that could be related to what you have what your values are about. You may not have strong sense of values about the car, those other things. That may not matter to you, but the relationships, how people are treated, that matters very much.
I didn't even notice the non-human realm or the fact that the practical world had any implication on my life until I was about 15. So that might be relevant to that.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben. You were on a thread.
Yeah, I was just saying that I've gone through the ENFP profile with Rachel, and I think she connected with what I see as the battle in the ENFP between FI and FE. This authenticity versus the EF part, the extroverted and feeling and attentive to other people's
really
feelings.
Strong in my late adolescence, really strong.
And there's a tension
Because I
there.
was so strong FI as a kid. I was such a this is what's right for me, this is what I do, and I was such a leader. But at the same time, I wanted to conform to everything around me, but I wasn't very manipulative. So it led to a big struggle because I wanted to do my own thing without leading other people to do that, but I didn't want to not conform.
Right, so it is a little bit, personally, Carol, I tend to use the Western definitions of feeling, and it's more in line with Carl Jung, where I see it as subjective, introverted feeling about personal ethics and values, and I see FE as extroverted, objective-ish, or societal FE. The way Socionics does it is slightly different. There's some validity to it, in that generally FE people tend to be more emotionally expressive, and those two types that are FE trickster, ISTJ and INTJ, they don't have much facial expression, or when they do show facial expression, it's blink and you miss it. They smile and then it's gone very quickly.
Yeah, right.
So, and the R is and the FI DOMs will particularly be, like I said, they know how they. I mean, Jack, I think, credit to him, I think he gave a good explanation of FI. Pardon?
Nothing. Continue, please.
I think you're probably amused by the fact that I gave him some credit. Okay. Right, because where he explained that, where he said that they know how they feel about people. When he talked about it as an ENTP resembler, he said that to him, it's like two categories of people. People who are his friends and people who are not his friends. And then he gave the example of the people who are strong FI valuers, that they have finely grained impressions of, well, this is like a best friend, this is like an acquaintance, this is like a good friend. It's like finely grained feelings of how they feel towards people. And they can like have these nuances within their feelings and relationships about people. Whereas ESTPs and ENTPs, they're not necessarily sensitive to those feelings.
Yeah, as I read something about introverted feeling being about being able to sense who has the power in a group, and also about senses of depth of connection. And I must admit that happens in me not intentionally, and it's not like I put labels on people, but I do have a kind of natural sense of how close I am or not close to that person, or a sense of whose power gets off the subject. Sorry, but yeah, I do feel like there's a natural FI going on about boundaries and about closeness and who is at what distance from you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And those different levels and layers, that seems natural.
Who raised me and had very little awareness of it. It was interesting how I began to understand my inherent understanding of that as I grew up, because I always had this awareness of it. But it wasn't really until I was living with an ESTJ that I was able to kind of, and in a very kind of a boys' school where I was actually able to, I don't know, feel like I wasn't just kind of picking up, because what I was picking up on just wasn't relevant in the context. Like, my dad had no sense of this, so when I did pick up on it, it it took me a long time to understand my internal feelings. And then when I was kind of befriended by an ENFJ, him having this sense of subtleties of interpersonal relationships and me being able to put a name on and really explore and understand that those feelings that I already had was really, really interesting, because until then I knew of this thing, but it was like this thing that you ignored because why would you pay attention to that?
Sorry.
Rachel,
Bye.
oh, bye. Nice to meet you.
It was
We'll
nice to
talk
meet
again.
you. Yeah,
Bye.
sure.
Bye, Vera. Rachel, I had a very similar experience raised by STJs and one NTJ. Nobody else had awareness of these things I was picking up on. So I was kind of totally on my own trying to figure all this out. It was so wonderful to get to college and meet other intuitive feelers, and especially to grow up and become a part of a psychological type group where I was talking and learning with people all the time. It's like they were now teaching me a way of understanding things I had picked up on and known it some way my whole life. But if nothing in your environment affirms that these things you're picking up on are real, you kind of keep it to yourself. You know, it was very liberating. I understand that feeling of somebody walking into your life who validates these things that you have been aware of. So thank you for that.
You're not very sensitive, not necessarily you're not very sensitive, but like you don't know how to deal with people or something. And it was like I was like, no, but I do understand what's going on. I understand how people are feeling, but I didn't have the confidence to act on that understanding because I'd never seen it modeled.
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, go on, Rachel. If you want to say a bit more about this.
That never having seen that understanding, anyone either having that understanding or not seeing enough of like people modeling how to behave in response to their understanding of other people. That's all.
This is a good example of how the person and the way they interact.
Acting to comfort other people to help them, but just not knowing what to do because of the narrow range of behaviour that I see in my environment.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And people don't exist in a vacuum. And as Kersey would call it, the social field and the impact of the social field.
But as soon as I saw even one person behaving that way and I saw it enacted, immediately I was able to take on that behaviour and own it and use that to enact my feeling. But I had to see it first. I had to see that it was acceptable for someone else to do it. Because until I saw it was acceptable, socially acceptable for someone to behave that way, I didn't want to act out that feeling.
Makes sense.
Right.
Ben, you're kind of frozen. There you go. You were kind of frozen for a minute.
Yeah, I've got Dario's definitions of FE and FI here, and then that was like, and then he expanded them a little bit with his findings.
Ben, if I can add something about this, as a Southern woman, and Southern culture is very extroverted feeling, and I am clearly introverted feeling, and I will tell you, this has been a source of great pain for me in my life because it's painful for me to not do the FE thing well because I'm a Southerner and I'm taught to do it, but it is even more painful to go against my own internal compass. Yeah. So sometimes I will not do the FE thing right because it hurts even worse, believe it or not, to be untrue to the internal compass. And that's why I think FE gets looked on as selfish sometimes by other people because they don't get how painful it is. It's like a survival mechanism. It is just too painful to go against our own internal compass. That makes sense, Ben?
Oh, wait a minute. You said FE looks selfish.
No. I'm saying when I choose introverted feeling over extroverted feeling, it makes me look selfish to the extroverted feelers. And I think extroverted feelers often interpret introverted feeling behavior as selfish. And it depends on, of course, what our values are, but if my values, even though my value, luckily how I treat other people is one of my values, so I don't come off looking bad too often that way. But I get it that it's very painful for introverted feelers to go against their own core value. And I get how introverted feelers can choose to think we're selfish because of that at times.
something relevant to this, and temperament comes in here when we're talking about creative FE. Is Jeff Miller said about ENFPs, and he compared them with ESFPs, and he said ENFPs are just like ESFPs, except they believe in stuff.
Well said. Oh, I'm going to write that down. That's precious, Ben.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that one, you chucked that up to Jeff. Jeff came up with that one.
Okay, that's good.
And ENFP is Jeff's favorite type pattern. So I think you get on well
very
with it.
cool. Well, come on, Ben. We are charming. You have to admit that.
Yes.
Listen, do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I was thinking about it. Was just that bit that said there. When I talked about Jeff about this, when he said the hard to embarrass, it's maybe, and I think Jeff said, well, and then other people will be embarrassed by different things compared to an FE feeler. I mean, I think an FI feeler, that if it was made to look like that they had compromised their values, they might feel embarrassed.
Oh, yeah, that'd be beyond the word embarrassment. But in terms of hard to embarrass, if somebody pointed something out I had done that was awkward or something, or I would make a joke about it and laugh at myself. So in that way, I would be hard to embarrass because I would join in the humor of it.
So somebody, like, for a joke, in quotation mark, stuck a Trump 2020 sticker on the back of your car, you wouldn't be much happy with that.
That would not be funny, Ben.
I would not do that.
No, because you'd have to come across the pond to do that.
Yeah.
You would not do that to me.
And I wouldn't. That would be, like I said, a joke in quotation marks. I think we've gone through all of the, pretty much all of the slides. There's me falling asleep in one hangout, so I can do that in this one.
That's terrible, Ben. Luckily, I've never seen that. Well, Ben, this was very helpful today. Thank you. And I enjoyed meeting Farah. That was very nice.
Oh, and you enjoyed meeting Rachel as well.
No, I know Rachel already.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that. Sorry.
Yeah, I know Rachel.
Right, so what I'll do now, folks, after this marathon hangout and all about the creative function, I'm going to stop the hangout and we'll talk for a little bit.